Merry Christmas. Good evening, everyone. Now, I'm not normally so into the festive spirit, but obviously this year it's really important. And I think we lost a couple of traditions over the years. I love Christmas stories. I love telling Christmas stories. And in the old days, someone would just sit down and read you a story. An author would tell you a story. You'd gather around the fire and Christmas stories would be exchanged. And I think my favourite story of all time has to be A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This is not, as some of you have asked, is that the Nativity? Is that with baby Jesus? It's got nothing to do with baby Jesus. It's got nothing to do with three wise men. There's no stable, there's no inn. Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens is the one where the mean old man who's lived a life full of stinginess and selfishness is visited by three ghosts in the night. The ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas future. And they show him the error of his ways and he wakes up transformed. I don't want to give any more spoilers than that, but it's a morality tale where ghosts from the past visit him. And what I wanted to do tonight was retell that story for you. It's going to be a short story reading. And it's set in Essex instead. I'm going to, obviously this is a live reading, so there's no, there's stumbles. I might make mistakes, I'll just crack on if that's all right. And it's set in Essex, Basildon. And it's set in 2019, so no mention of COVID. It's Christmas 2019. I've got a mulled wine on the go. I'm in my Christmas jumper and I cannot wait to share this Christmas story with you. So this is going to be an Essex Christmas Carol updated for you for Christmas 2020. So gather round, people aged 14 and above. There are some adult words in here. There's references to sex, drugs and swearing, but it's probably suitable for aged 14 and above. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you an Essex Christmas Carol. Increase a red light for a dramatic beginning. So we start the story in Gary Screw's garage. And Gary Screw used to own this garage with his partner, Jack Marley. That's the backstory, for those who aren't familiar with the story. Jack Marley had died some years before. That was definite. He was crushed flat as an A4 sheet at the back of the workshop, off his tits on gear at 2 AM. He'd gone back to the garage from the Beehive nightclub to finish a refurb on a Ford gearbox. Yep, dead, gone. And that was the end of Jack Marley. Do you know it could even be 10 years now? Imagine, a whole decade gone and Gary Screw hadn't thought of his dear old departed partner Jack, I don't think even once. Poor old Jack Marley, who died as he would have wanted, as he was named, under a jack, at the back of a garage, a wanked out Ford Mondeo compressing him from the post lift. Do you know his last words were, "Ah, fuck me gently," and he farted and died. Gary Screw allowed himself a bitter, reflective smile. Was that really 10 years? Fucking hell. Well, Gary Screw didn't remember exactly how long, and being completely honest, he didn't much care. He'd gone to the funeral. He hadn't bothered in the end to go to the after service. Janet Marley, Jack's missus, she didn't really like him. And besides, there's pressure in it to buy flowers, to create expenses. Nah, dead is dead. What's the point of lobbing pricey flowers at a coffin full of meat? No point, mate. Bah, bollocks to it, said Gary Screw aloud, and smirked as his breath danced on the air at the garage's back office, which was colder than a farm food prawn ring. He clicked the side of his ancient phone. Through its desiccated, cracked screen, he could just make out the time and date, 4:57 PM, December the 24th. He looked across at his only employee, Tommy Cratchit. "Everything all right, Gary?" said Tommy Cratchit in his unbearable chirpy tone, whilst wiping his blue cold fingers on his greasy overalls. "Have a guess, Tommy, you fucking numpty. We've not done one bit of customs today. Nothing. Well, it is Christmas Eve, gal. Bah, bollocks to it, retorted Gary Screw. What good is Christmas for profit? Can Christmas festive cheer pay for everything? I don't think so, Tommy. And he gestured violently with his bitten Bic pen toward the single glowing bar of the gas fire, which burned in doleful stinginess. He had reluctantly put it on at lunchtime when Tommy had been theatrically shivering the weak prick, thought Gary Screw. Look, Gary, I've tidied up the workshop. I've done the oil on the Jag. Any chance I could chip off before 5:30 p.m? I want to pick up some mince pies, gravy, stuff like that. Gary Screw's face was as though someone had done a 5 rounds Guinness fart under his nose and then followed through. You fucking what, Tommy? Well, it's Crimbo bits, gal. You know what it's like. Kelly and Tiny Tyrone, they're excited. My God, you really do buy into all this commercial bollocks, don't you? It's just designed to rip you off, mate, said Gary Screw showerly. I suppose you'll want tomorrow off too. What, Christmas Day? Yeah, of course, mate, if that's cool. Cool? Bah, bollocks to it. You know, it's not even the law. I have to give you Christmas Day off, but I will. I'm not a total cut. Thanks, boss, said Tommy. He couldn't bear to hear that word, not on Christmas Eve. Tommy thought of his long dead mummy belting out songs in the choir. No words at Christmas for the Cratchits. Boxing Day, though, put in Gary Screw, extinguishing the fire's solitary bar. I've got that manifold on a Renault Clio. That wants looking at. And more importantly, mate, there is a backlog of moody MOT passes to get through. I don't think we should pass that Mark III Escort, Gov. Fuck off. You're doing it. You're fucking doing it, OK? Yes, Gov, replied Tommy dejectedly, before gathering up his things and walking to the exit of the grey, icy building. Well, Merry Christmas then, gal. Bah, bollocks to it, was all he replied. Gary Screw, nearly past his 40s, not in his 60s, had no wife, no children, no pets, no debts, no commitments to anything in the world except his garage and his savings, and that's the way he liked it. He had no surviving siblings. His only sister Donna had died from something or other 15 years previous, and he was supposed to keep an eye on his nephew Teddy, but sod that. Teddy was a hairy 30-year-old now. Teddy could take care of himself. He should. He's a grown man who took care of me, thought Gary. Leaving the snowy winds of Market Square behind him, Gary Screw walked in the moon-on-the-square Wetherspoons, Basildon. That's one good thing about Christmas, he said to himself, finding a seat. Set menus. Nice, cheap set menus. Handsome. He moved to the quietest corner of the pub. Its carpet was sticky, as though a giant fly had vomited on the whole establishment and was trying to digest it. Even the table was sticky. Gary liked that, mind. He liked things that stuck around. He liked solid things. He ate his usual double feast of a 2-for-1 meal, all for himself. His only festive concession was to make one of his meals the turkey special, which came with a roasted breast and legs that looked like they'd been tortured at Guantanamo Bay. He slathered both meals in complimentary dips and condiments, being sure to swipe extra sachets of salt and vinegar for his home supply. His Christmas Day meal tomorrow would be the same as always. Egg and chips, battery hen eggs, and McCain's frozen chips. Delicious. That's a Christmas feast. He drained his half-pint of Foster's and approached the till to buy his dessert. Crisps. Anything else? Said the barmaid, Helen Singleton, with a repulsively familiar tone. Who the fuck was she to use his first name? She might be the same age as him, and she seemed to rather like him, but how dare she? Nothing else, sweetheart, said Gary, thinking, I wouldn't shag her if you paid me. Raw. Do you know what that means? Raw. Rather have a wank, he thought, and chuckled grimly. The hand shandy can be relied upon, and if it wants to spend money, well, then it's your own hand spending the money. So, doesn't matter, does it? It's not some Doris who's sponging. He thought all of this silently. Would you like to stick a quid in the homeless pot? She said. You what, darling? Well, You've got more than a dozen homeless people in this town. They could freeze to death on Christmas Eve. It breaks your heart, doesn't it, Gary? Gary Screw, crimsoned furious at being shook down like this by a gaping-mouthed idiot, this slapper. Homeless people dying, are they? He said. Well, they'd better get on with it then and decrease the surplus population. He slammed his coins down and marched out. Well, Merry Christmas then, Gary. Bah, bollocks to it. And for good measure, he gobbed at a small, crouched homeless man on the square as he passed him. He was almost at the front door of his studio block when he heard a sound. Uncle? Uncle Screw? It's Uncle Gary, my God. I haven't seen you for nearly 3 months. It was his nephew, Teddy. He was wearing a festive red hat at a jaunty angle, 3 or 4 bags in each hand. Poking out the top were clear cases of lustrous glazed puddings and cakes. Other bags were crammed with shinily wrapped gifts, ornate bows, here a bottle of champagne, there a Christmas ale. I don't know for the life of me how I've carried all of this, Uncle, he said, chuckling. Well, you should have driven it then, shouldn't you? Was all Gary Screw said. Not even a hello. You still got that wanked out Corsa with the shit gearbox, I suppose. Look, I've had a few beers, Uncle Gary. I'm not driving. Bah! Look, Uncle Screw, there's a place at our table tomorrow for Christmas dinner, 3 p.m. We've got a goose and a turkey. We've got plenty of booze. Why don't you come over? I've got a suggestion, Teddy, said Gary Screw with a crooked smirk. Why don't you fuck off? Teddy burst out laughing. You're lucky I love you, he said, taking the insult as top-drawer banter and irony of the highest order. I'm not a fan of Christmas. You know that, Edward. Well, at least take this card. The wife wrote it. I was just about to post it through. Gary Screw pincered the card from Teddy like he was lifting a dog shit from a liner. Right. Night, then. Merry Christmas, Uncle, said Teddy, his head dropping slightly. Ah, bollocks to it. And slamming the door behind him, Gary Screw entered the block and entered his ground floor flat. He put his DeLonghi oil heater on its lowest setting, and then he made himself a little fire in the sink, a fire which comprised the unopened card from his nephew Teddy. It's not like there was any cash in it, was there? Silly fucker, he said. Gary went back to his front door to put the chain on, and that's when he saw a most alarming thing. Only for a second, but unmistakably so. The chain and the bolt. Maybe it was the light, maybe it was the angle. Maybe it was being drunk from his half pint. The chain and the bolt, made in steel. It took on the face of his old, dead business partner, Jack Marley. The chain, the chin, the dimple, the nose. I could have sworn he heard a gasp. You wanking me off? He barked out loud to no one. The tiny fire in the sink extinguished and Gary did what he never did. He treated himself to the hallway light being switched on. That's a real treat. The chain in his hand, well, it was completely normal. But he'd seen it, had he not? The face of his dead business partner, Jack Marley, described in steel chains. Fuck me. I need to roll up a fucking bifter, said Gary. And for only the second time that year, he grabbed his emergency weed from the Clark's shoebox under the heavy, leaky sink. Gary Screw's heating came on for only 90 minutes each day, 5 a.m. till 6:30 p.m. 5 a.m. till 6:30 a.m. By the time Gary crawled, pleasantly stoned, in his ancient pyjamas under his grimy duvet at 11 p.m, his dismal flat was colder than the lifeless gaze upon his face. He liked being cold. It amused Gary to watch ice form on the inside of his windows. Sometimes, like to amuse himself, he would, in his breath, draw a cock and bollocks on the frozen pane. If it was cold enough, Gary Screw often finished his day with a smile by defrosting the toilet bowl with his final slash. A laser of piss, he would say out loud. Gary Screw switched off his old crap telly. Nothing good on it anyway. Just people lying to each other about festive love and cheer and all that bollocks. The only thing Gary Screw enjoyed was EastEnders because the people in it were ugly and always died at Christmas. Well, night then, he said to no one at all, and with a sour scowl. And then he heard it. Cow! Gary! Gary! What the fuck? Rising up at the foot of his fetid duvet, Gary Screw observed a limp, pale spectre. There was no doubt about it. The vapour, the apparition, had the shape of Jack Marley. Jack? Who else? You soppy cunt. Nah, mate. Nah, Gary said to himself desperately. My weed must be out of date. It's old. I'm tripping off seeds here. You ain't tripping. It's me, Gary. It's Jack Marley. The ghoul certainly had the face of Gary's long-dead partner, Jack Marley. There was even ghostly white gear stains under its nostril, exactly as it had been the night Jack Marley was crushed to death, high on coke, underneath a Ford Mondeo. What do you... Just listen to me, you miserable twat. I'm cursed to walk the earth in limbo, but you can avoid the same fate, Gary Screw. Tonight, at midnight, you'll be voted and visited by 3 ghosts. Heed the warnings, and you can avoid the eternal torture which I live. A foul, stinking wind went through Gary's hair, and the ghost of Jack Marley vanished. I think I just shat myself, said Gary. But bollocks, I must be tripping. He didn't sound as sure as he usually did, and he immediately went to the toilet for a precautionary wipe, just to see if he'd farted and followed through. In fact, Gary Screw didn't move one of his miserable muscles until his cracked old iPhone told him it was precisely midnight. Boom. 0000. There we are. Midnight. And no ghosts. He knew it. 3 ghosts. His old boss back from the dead. It was the old weed. Shouldn't have smoked it. It was nothing. Back to sleep then, he told himself. As he pulled the greasy quilt to his nose, he heard something unmistakable. The drumming of fingers coming from the kitchen. And a wind. Gary Screw crept out of his bedroom and peered into his kitchenette. His oilcloth table, for once, was gleaming. His solitary dining seat occupied with a blazing, human-shaped presence. Well, it's no good spying, said a voice in a strong Brummie accent. I'm a supernatural being, you silly twat. I'm all-seeing. If you fart, I can smell it before it's left your arsehole. There, sat at Gary Screw's wonky excuse for a dining station, was a man who seemed both boy and pensioner at the same time, skinny yet fat, pearl white one minute, then a dark cloud the next, amorphous, yet somehow solid. Come here then, you silly bastard. Oh, do you want to tell me who you are, mate? I'm Dudley. I'm the ghost of Christmas past. Oh, ghost. Please don't hurt me. I'm not going to hurt you, you baby Belle. What's wrong with you? Am I having a stroke? I'm only 49. Oh, fuck. Well, I suppose you are, really. You're having a stroke of luck, baby Belle. The spectral thing crossed towards Gary Screw. It was in his face, right up close. I want to show you something, Gary Screw. You passed, you bastard! And then Dudley, the ghost of Christmas past, laid his fingers on Gary's face. A flash of snow-cold light, and when Gary opened his eyes, he was no longer in his cheerless flat. Stretched out in front of him, his stoned eyes trying to focus, was a long pier, frost-covered. The estuary sea around its wooden pilings looked almost frozen. Gary looked down at his feet. He was in the car park at his old school, but Cantworth High had closed years ago. I'm in Southend. This is Southend. Look closer, Gary. It's a Southend. But that's a Sea Ridge Austin Maestro going past. And that's a Ford Granada Gear. What year is this? The spirit smiled craftily. Gary spun around as children disgorged from the children's main entrance, screaming, hollering, all of them in flares and collars. "This is your past, Gary Screw." The last child left skipping, but more slowly and alone. It was a younger version of himself, the younger Gary Screw. "Don't panic, Gary. These are just recordings of the past. They can't react to you. They can't see you. Just watch." "What, like a VR headset?" "More than that, Gary Screw. I didn't rate a VR headset. I just used it for porn. I had to get rid of it." "I know, Gary. We were all watching." Gary shuddered. But look, Spirit, I'm making a snow angel." "But you're alone, Gary. Joy, but alone. The start of your pattern." Yeah, I struggled to make friends. It was my dad. He told me to be careful of people, you know what I mean? Take care of number one and all that. I look happy though, don't I? Do you, Gary? Well, I'm lonesome a bit, I guess. I never saw that before. Lonesome. And just a child to be so lonesome. The snow swirled up around Gary, and he found himself in a Southend garage 10 years later. "You're about 16 here, Gary. Watch this scene." It was from his first job, the scene. Working for Brian Fezziwig down at Prittlewell Mechanics. My God, he'd forgotten what Christmas Eve was like at the garage. Old Fezziwig would shut up the shop about midday and they'd have a Christmas piss up around the car jacks. Mince pies with sambuca poured on them, and they'd light the mince pies and then eat them. Fucking Fezziwig caught his mouth on fire once, eating a sambuca pie. And there's Fezziwig's daughter. God, I loved her. I lost my cherry to that. I smashed her in the park by the dog shit bins. God, what a summer that was. "She loved you too, Gary. Remember?" said the ghost. And with that, Gary was transported a couple of years hence. Before him was the 18-year-old version of himself, already hollow around the eyes, already mean and ambitious. It was the day he dumped Fezziwig's daughter. "I love you, Gary. My dad loved you, God rest his soul. He thought we were forever, do you know that? It's a garage, babe. I have to work a few years on saving. That's more important. 7 days a week I'm going to work until my garage is paid for. And a bit of fanny ain't going to stop my ambitions." "A bit of fanny, Gary. Lovely." "Oh, ghost," said Gary Screw, unable to bear watching the scene play out in front of him. "Take me away from this scene. Take me away." "And yet it's your life you want to be taken away from, Gary. A life without love." Snow blew into Gary Screw's eyes, and he found himself sat at the kitchen table once more. What the fuck was that? He looked at his old phone. It was midnight again. Do you know what? I'm going to bed. I'm going to have a tug, get myself sleepy, and go off to Nod. That must have been me tripping out. That was my imagination. I'm going to bed. I'm done for the night. "I wouldn't advise that, wee man." Gary felt an outlet of cold breath on his nape. Right behind him, was a small woman with a bowl haircut. "Sit down in the fucking seat." Oh my God. Are you Nicola Sturgeon? "Not exactly, no. I'm the ghost of Christmas present. Nicky Sturgers." You really look like her. Fuck me. I'd rather not. Why don't you have a wee look out there? And with that, she threw him through the glass of his flat window. Although it shattered, he was unhurt. And when he landed, he was not on the street outside the window of his own flat. He was outside the window of his assistant, Tommy Cratchit's flat. "Why am I here, ghost?" "Don't you call me ghost. Did I tell you to do that?" No. "Well, you just fucking follow what I'm saying, or I'll put your head through another window you can." "Okay." "Now, look through that wee pane of glass there into Tommy Cratchit, your employee's window." It was Tommy Cratchit's flat. Daytime, lunchtime. Their Christmas feast. What, so this Christmas... Is it this Christmas, is it? More or less, it's Christmas lunchtime. Just watch the scene, you wee cunt, you. Through the glass, Gary Screw witnessed bliss, warmth and happiness. Although Tommy Cratchit was holding a modest-sized little chicken, it was perfectly bronzed, sprinkled with herbs. Tommy Cratchit's wife was holding their boy, Tyrone. How old was he? 7, 8? Yeah, he was no bigger than a 4-year-old. What's wrong with the boy? Exactly, Christmas present. You've never even asked, have you, you cold bastard? Is something bad, something he was born with? But he's so tiny. Tiny Tyrone. Yet just look how happy the wee boy is. The family before him laughed. Yes, it was a meagre little chicken, tinned veg, cheap mince pies from the year before, but still in date, just. The most meagre spread of Christmas accoutrements and toys. Yet somehow, these modest trinkets glittered as brightly as tiny Tyrone's eyes. They were jolly. Will the boy make adulthood, Nicola? Well, this is the present, so who knows? Maybe he will, and maybe he won't. They are very poor. But you could have changed that by paying Tommy Cratchit proper money. Enough, Christmas present. Enough. Well, I have one last thing to show you, you wee bastard, you. A whoosh of snow, and Gary Screw was now sat in the lounge of his nephew, Teddy, who was with his wife. She was called... Damn, Gary couldn't even summon up her name. You can't even remember what the lassie's called, can you? She's married to your nephew. You don't even know her fucking name. It's Debbie, you wee bellend. Debbie, that's right. When is this? They look really drunk. It's Christmas afternoon, isn't it, today? Why are they laughing so loud? They're actually crying from it. It's infectious. And Gary Screw, so relieved to finally have a scene of positivity before him, also began laughing. What are they laughing at? Just listen, said the ghost. Just pay heed. They were doing impressions of some sort. I'll do it again, Teddy. It's uncanny, begged Debbie with amusement. Teddy took on a comically hunched, miserable walk and began his mini show. Gary Screw knew straight away who his nephew was taking off. He's doing an impression of me, isn't he? Said Gary, forlornly. Hello, said Teddy, impersonating his uncle. This Christmas, I will be dining alone on roast sparrow. For heating, I will suck on an extra strong mint, and then I will sit round my own tongue. After dinner, I'm going to play my favourite game of warm the sausage with myself. Everyone needs romance at Christmas. Oh, my God, stop it, Teddy, said Debbie. I'm going to put mistletoe over my bell end. Oh, Teddy, stop, I can't take it. And then, for a treat, I thought I'd slowly die under my spunk-covered duvet and no one finds my body. How about that for a New Year present? They both howled, swigging their drinks. He really is a miserable, horrible cunt, said Debbie, wiping laughter from her eyes. Come on, babe, come on. He's still blood. Yeah, he's bloody awful. No. Now, come on, Debbie, you take it too far. He's my Uncle Screw. Do you know what I mean? On 1 year, I swear to you, he's going to get the Christmas spirit and he's going to come over. He will. Do you know what? Cheers to him, despite himself. Cheers to Uncle Gary Screw. That's what I say. Yeah, okay. Cheers to the cut, Debbie. All right, then. Cheers to Uncle Screw, then. And I'm saying it just for you, mind. Oh, go do the impression again, Ted. Go on. Ghost, begged Gary Screw from his invisible vantage point. Take me back, I get it. I'm hated. Even though I smash out MOT certs and keep people on the road. Fake and dangerous. MOT certs, you bent bastard. Gary Screw was crying. All right, I get it. He was sobbing like a child who's farted and followed through. You soft fucker. And I told you, don't call me ghost. An almighty punch in the face. And he was back at his kitchen table. He would love to have told himself the whole thing was a continued hallucination. But the blood was trickling down his nose. His pyjamas were wet and cold. He looked again at his pathetic old iPhone. 11:58 p.m. for a third time. I can't take any more. I don't want to hear a ghost's voice again. Not one more syllable. I get it. I'm a prick. Blah, blah, blah. I'm lonely. I'm going to die alone. I've got nothing. I've got nothing left. And he chucked out a mighty Ian Beale of a sob. I got nothing left. If only Gary Screw had known that what he wished for, a silent ghost, was about to come true. The next apparition would be wordless, as requested. I don't want to hear another ghost's words. And how much more terrifying is a ghost which simply looks and points and does not speak? What's that? Gary Screw could hear a distant bass. The siren of techno. The unmistakably consistent thud of a nightclub banger going off like a piece of meat left in the sun. Before him, manifesting with a puff of ganja smoke, in torn black clubber's robes, a baseball cap, and with sunken grey last day of Ibiza skin, was a lank, dirty-looking person or thing, slightly translucent. Its recessed, leaden eyes fixed him, nightclub pupils permanently dilated in a timeless dose of double-dipped pills which have gone wrong for eternity. Oh my God, you look like the bloke who mongs out in the corner of Pasha. Are you the ghost of Christmas future? I bring in the future, the future, the future. Doodly-did, doodly-did-did-did. The ghost did not answer. Instead, one hand pulsed and raved to a distant beat, its jaw chewing and gurning constantly. It's off its spiritual tits, said Gary to himself. The ghost pointed its pulsating techno finger at the door, and with a swinging, ghostly Mandy chin, impelled Gary Screw onto the street. But as he opened his door, it was no longer night, but day. At least this time, his street looked almost the same. But wait, the street lights they're LEDs. The cars. It's always the first thing Gary Screw noticed, cars. There were so many more electric cars, and there were drones, and the Christmas Day children were on electrically assisted skate trainers. This was Christmas Day in the future then. The ghost pointed at a long black electric car approaching slowly along the street from Jaeger Avenue. Follow it? Asked Gary Screw. But the spirit appeared simply to have a rush, its teeth chattering with third pill high, till finally it flipped its gurning chin in assent. As Gary Screw followed the snail pace-moving car, he realised that it was an electric hearse, and inside it was a puny rattan coffin. No one else followed. A few people stood on the street watching, sneering. Some were gossiping quietly and laughing. It's definitely him. They found him on the 21st, said a short old lady. Merry Christmas to the maggots then. How long had he been dead? Replied a tall one. 8 weeks. He must have stunk like my Christmas Stilton. The silly bastard. Do you know he'd saved $1 million in cash, said another short old lady. And to die of starvation. That's weird, said another. He must have had some kind of mental illness. Yeah, bell end disease. And they all laughed and pointed at the direction of the dead body within. Whose corpse is this I'm following? Why are you showing me this? Asked Gary Screw with a growing foreboding. A shush of snow, and he found himself at the graveyard. The ghost of Christmas future was biting a dove pill in half and necking it without water. It danced next to Gary. Before him was a snow-covered grave. He was transported in a moment to the graveside, and inside this snow-covered grave was a deep trench of frozen mud. The scrawny, stingy rattan coffin was at the bottom. It already had a light powder of snow upon it. There was no one at the graveyard, no one grieving whoever was in this. This is sad, but why show me this? I don't understand, said Gary, although the tremor in his spliff-ruined voice betrayed the fact he had indeed worked this out. He heard some footsteps behind him. It was a man with a beard, in his 40s. Wait a minute, good God. Teddy? This vision of Teddy, the future version of Gary Screw's nephew, of course did not react. It too, this future thing, it's just a projection, just a film of what will or what might come to pass years hence. Teddy approached the graveyard. His eyes were red from crying. Ghost. It's fucking me, innit? I'm in that fucking box. Oh, fuck. The ghost pointed its hard house, jumping finger at Teddy. At least one person mourns me. One, that's something. My cousin, the little nephew Teddy, he mourns me. The ghost shook its head and motioned to its ears. Gary Screw listened. Teddy spoke down into the grave. These, Uncle, these tears, they're not for you. You cold, horrible bastard. Johnny's tears are for my Debbie, and what you could have done for her if only you'd had the good decency to die before last Christmas would have done it. What use is all your filthy money to me now? I begged you, 30k would have bought her the treatment, it maybe would have saved her life. No, fuck it. Humbug to you, Uncle Screw. Yeah, I'm going to take your money. Do you know what I'm going to do with it? I'm going to burn it in the dog shit bin over the park. That filthy money. They tell me you had a coronary. But how could you have had a heart attack when you never had a heart? And with that, Teddy opened his fly and began urinating into the ditch and onto the coffin. The hot liquid melted the snow and soaked through the porous rattan. Teddy? Ghost! He's pissing on my fucking corpse, that ain't right. Hot steam rose from the muddy cavity. Teddy stood for a moment, shook his member, then walked away, uttering curses into the air. The ghost looked at Screw while producing a glow stick from his pocket. It snapped the glow stick, and neon flashed in Gary Screw's eyes. When Gary opened his eyes, he was in his bed. It was morning, and no doubt about it, he was soaked in piss. It's over. It's over. I'm alive, he said, screaming and kicking. Yippee! Yay! Gary Screw, for the first time in his life, did cardio at the foot of his bed, but not for health, it was for joy. Each jumping jack was in his mind a Christmas star. And every time his saggy cock and bollocks hit his pelvis, he giggled a Christmassy chortle. Merry Christmas, everyone! Merry Christmas, everyone! But there was no one there, so he flung open his window. Some boys were having a snowball fight on the street. Oi, lads! Merry Christmas! Fuck off, you old pedo! But Gary, instead of getting annoyed, grabbed a handful of 20s from his stash above the cooker and flung them onto the street. Oh, wow! Look, boys, it's snowing again, he said ironically. Wow, Mr. Screw, thank you, said the youngest boy. Careful, he might just be noncing, said the eldest boy, but he was still smiling. Gary Screw tugged on his clothes and with the speed of a cheating husband. Within minutes, he was dashing along the icy street, wildly greeting people with theatrical Christmas bows and waves. Some were genuinely concerned for him. "He wants sectioning," said Mrs. Gupta from number 82. "Indeed I do, Ranny, for I am mad. Mad on Christmas. Merry Christmas, you old bitch." It was 9 a.m. on the dot. The Basildon Butcher opened for 1 hour every Christmas morning for those with last-minute needs. And sure enough, in his window was a turkey. It was a turkey that looked like it had been on steroids since it hatched. It was a monster, the type of bird which could break the axle of a Ford Transit. "How much for that mofo, the one in the window?" said Gary Screw wildly. "That one? You can't be serious, mate. That's 300 sheets. It's just for show, really." "I'll take it. I'll take it, and all the trimmings too. And send everything." He smashed some notes down on the table. "Send it to the Cratchits. You know my assistant, Tommy Cratchit, my apprentice? Send it to his house on Meister Way. It's number 17. You know the house. And put this in the turkey's arse." He handed the butcher a very large wad of notes. "Okay, you got it," said the butcher, perplexed. "And here's 100 for you." Gary Screw hit FaceTime on his cracked iPhone. Tommy Cratchit appeared, his wife fuming behind him. "Gary, I can't have you calling me on Christmas Day." "Shut up, Tommy. Just you fucking shut up and listen." "Merry Christmas, mate." "There's a turkey on its way. I don't even think it's real. It looks like the Russians have been experimenting on an ostrich. It's for you. If you start cooking it now, it'll be ready next Christmas. It's fucking massive. It's my gift to you. And do not put it in the oven without looking inside its arse, because you won't find giblets. I'll put 15 grand in there in cash. Call it back payments. It's yours, mate. Now, don't you dare show your face in the office till January the 4th. Do you know why? We're closed for Crimbo." But Gary..." "Merry Christmas," he said with an insane glee. And he dropped his phone on the floor and stamped on it. "Fuck it, I'll just order another one online." Moments later, and he was rapping at the door of his nephew. "Uncle Screw," said Teddy, still in his boxers. "Who's that?" said Debbie. It's your Uncle Screw. I've come for Christmas Day, Teddy. You're right. I've been a miserable bastard. But today things change, mate." "He's having a stroke," said Debbie, genuinely concerned. "I'll call the hospital." "I'm not, Debbie. I'm simply having a Christmas. And to you too, happy Christmas. Do you know what? I didn't have time to get a present, so I thought of something. I care about your health. So do you know what I'm buying you? I'm buying you both Bupa private healthcare for life. I want you both to be healthy. You're the only family I've got, and I want to be involved. You might have kids one day. I want to be there. Now, may I come the fuck in?" "Bloody hell," said Teddy. "In you come then." "Do you know what I want to do?" said Gary. "I want to get wankered and play games." "But it's not even 10 a.m, Uncle Gary." "Exactly." Merry Christmas. And not only did Gary, Teddy and Debbie have one of the best Christmas days they've ever had, they had many more, including the one after Debbie had a routine private scan, which easily picked up something minor, which could so easily have become something major. But that was years from this moment. Years in which, for that matter, down the road, at Gary's apprentice house, the Cratchits, well, they prospered also. As soon as Tommy was made partner in the garage, he had enough wonga to help Tiny Tyrone. He wasn't tiny for very many more Christmases. Do you know why? He got the therapy he needed. He was cured. But that Christmas, the one we're talking about, the one of Gary Screw's revelation, even though the Cratchits didn't need that massive turkey that Gary Screw sent, Tommy Cratchit felt his festive joy redoubled, as did his son, who already looked a little bigger there, smiling in his seat. "Merry Christmas, everyone," said Tiny Tyrone. And if you listened on the wind, at the other side of town, you could faintly hear Gary Screw constantly cackling with Christmas joy. "I'm properly wankered, Teddy," he was exclaiming. I'm properly wankered. Merry fucking Christmas to one and all. Merry Christmas, everyone. Have a blinder no matter what tier you're in.